Thank you all for coming, and it's really very nostalgic to be back in the Bronx, and especially here at Lehman. 40 years ago I graduated. It doesn't quite feel like 40 years ago, but it was. And I hadn't been back here until several months ago, and it's amazing how much this college has changed from the time that I attended till now. And it's not only the physical infrastructure that's changed, but the number of courses and what's available to you. This particular center didn't exist. There were essentially 4 buildings and an oval where everybody lied out and got some sun. So in any event, I'm here tonight to talk about career and career transitions. I've had an interesting career, and I'll get into some of the details and give you at least 10 things that I think I've learned over the years that has really helped in my career, and specifically helped move my career from one thing to another. So I'm going to get into that in a moment, but I thought it might be helpful for you to have some background to put all this in context. So I'm going to give you a little background on my education, some of which you've heard, and a little bit of background on my career. So graduated public schools, born, raised in the Bronx, lived at the intersection of Highbridge and Morris Heights, west of the Grand Concourse, west of University Avenue, east of Sedgwick. Fond memories of growing up in the Bronx. Went to Bronx High School of Science, walked a couple of blocks, and attended Lehman from 1969 to 1973. Worked all through the years I was at Lehman. I had some interesting jobs. I'll get into that in a moment. But I found that when I was at Lehman, work was certainly not a detriment. It was actually helpful, because I found that at the time when I was taking accounting courses, I really couldn't relate it to work experience, and it was all kind of gone over my head. But when I was working and I saw the practical aspect of it, it was really helpful. So at Lehman, occasionally I'd go to school in the morning, work in the afternoon, once in a while come back at night, took some classes on Saturday, and I think I got a pretty good education. When I graduated Lehman, I really wanted to get my master's after working a couple of years, but found that I couldn't give up my $13,000 a year job, so I delayed getting my master's for about 33 years, actually, and had the opportunity to go back to Boston University, and I obtained an MS in banking and financial services in 2007. It was an interesting experience because I did everything online, and I frankly did a lot better at BU than I did here. I think I was more focused, I was more challenged. I wanted to achieve a better index than I had here, and I won't tell you what my index was here, but it wasn't as good as the 3.9 I got from BU. And today, interestingly enough, I'm a teaching assistant at BU, but I do it all online. I'm also on the board of one of the colleges at BU. So in terms of work experience, 8th grade, I delivered newspapers in my building. While in high school, I was a camp counselor, I was a busboy, I was a waiter, worked all through high school in kind of low-level jobs. When I got to Lehman, somehow through connections, my mother, I got a job at a publishing firm and was doing royalty accounting. I was trying to figure out how much we pay authors based on the number of units that were sold, and it was all done manually on cards that look like this. And it was a good experience, because again, it was practical, it was accounting, almost accounting. And I did that for 2 years, and then the last 2 years I was at Lehman in my junior and senior year, I was lucky enough to get a job in the administrative department of a large CPA firm. at the time there were the big 8, and then there was everybody else, and this firm was like number 9 or number 10. So I was able to work there for 2 years, and I think I did a decent job, and they hired me as a junior accountant. A couple of years later, I got my CPA, and I spent 5 years full-time at the CPA firm. And you reach a point where you need to make a decision: do I want that to be my career, or do I want to do something else? And I really did want to do something else. My dream was to become a chief financial officer for a publicly traded company. So I had to take an interim step, which I'll talk about, in terms of making a 45 or 90-degree turn, and I became the director of internal audit for a large clinical laboratory. Today that clinical laboratory is called Quest Diagnostics, and it's probably the largest clinical lab in the world. But my job during the year and a half I spent at what was MetPath, now Quest, was director of internal audit, but really in disguise I was working for the chairman, and I was running around the country doing something I hadn't really been trained for, which was due diligence in anticipation of an acquisition. We were in acquisition mode, and as I said, I ran around the country. I remember looking at 18 different labs, and we acquired 13 of them over the course of a year and a half. The company grew as a result of these acquisitions. I grew in terms of the skills that I had, and it was a win-win. I left there, even though I really loved working for the chairman. I left there because there were 2 people who were a couple of years older than me that were blocking my way to become the chief financial officer, which is what I wanted, and had the opportunity to go up to Windsor Locks, Connecticut. If you don't know where Windsor Locks is, it's about 12 miles north of Hartford and candidly in the middle of nowhere. It's equidistant between Boston and New York, but it's 2 hours each way, so nobody goes to Boston or New York unless it's a special occasion. So I was locked up there for 5 years, but I got tremendous experience as a CFO. During the late 70s, early 80s, you really didn't need finance to become a CFO. I didn't really have all the skills, but someone took a chance, and I think I got some great experience over those 5 years, and I was the CFO of a publicly traded company, and that was my dream. I left there as the company was downsized as a result of some of the deals that I was doing. The company wasn't in good shape. About 3 months after I started, a tornado hit the main facility, and I became an expert in accounting for tornado losses. So if anybody ever has a tornado and needs some help, I'm out there and I'm available. In 1979, I collected $16 million as a result of this particular tornado from the insurance company, and I milked it over the course of a number of years. And you could be a little more creative then in terms of how you accounted for tornadoes. Left there, joined a software and services company, had never touched a computer, and I was doing everything, by hand, and the PC was really coming into vogue, and I was joining a software and services company as the CFO. And what I did was, my boss, the chairman of the company, gave me a PC XT, which at the time the only manufacturer was IBM. He said, "Take it home and figure it out." Well, I took it home, and months of struggle, I figured it out. And I spent a couple of years at that company, took it private, sold it, made some serious money for a lot of people, including myself, and started an investment banking firm, subsequently started a venture capital firm. And today I have, I'm pleased to say I have 4 jobs. First job is managing director of this investment banking firm. Chairman of the Indian subsidiary, so I go to India quite a bit because it's something I started and championed. I'm a partner in a venture capital firm I started in the late 90s. And the two things I'm most proud of that I'm really stimulated by today are I'm running an incubator in New York that focuses on human capital management technology companies. It's for startups who are in that arena somewhere. It's an area that I've had a lot of experience. I've done investing in, and I've made some good money. So I'm doing this partially to give back and partially to invest in some of these companies because I think I know how to accelerate their growth. The last thing that I do is I'm a teaching assistant at Boston University, and I work with students that are graduate students who are taking finance courses, the same courses that I took to get my degree. So what I want to do tonight is talk about 10 specific things that I think have helped my career and have helped in terms of transitions. And some of them you may think are out of the box, but you may take one or two away and say, you know, that's a decent idea. That's my hope. So the first thing I want to mention is, and it's all in the handouts, is adopt a mentor or have a mentor adopt you. I've been lucky enough in the course of my career to have two mentors. The first adopted me. He was a partner, a senior partner at the accounting firm, and when I was a junior here at Lehman, I was working directly for him, and he started giving me, you know, basically menial tasks, and over the course of 2 years, I did more and more, and I ultimately, you know, interned there during the summer, actually did audit work, but he was watching over my career, and he was very helpful. I remember the first instance where I really screwed up, and he sat down with me and showed me, even though it was very menial, how I really needed to focus my attention and, you know, do the work no matter what and prove it out. It was a relatively simple task as I look back on it. The second mentor I had, I adopted, and he's currently my partner. He was the chairman of the software and services company that I talked about before. He's really a great individual. He's been my partner now for 30 years when we started the investment banking firm together. And what I mean in terms of adopting a mentor is emulating what they do. I'll never forget, he would come up to me and said, "How can I help you?" And just the asking me that, you know, sets the right tone. It sets the tone that we're all in this together, and I believe that when you do something like that, it really helps the culture of the company. But I followed his lead. I learned a lot about technology from him, and I learned a lot about sales and marketing. Hopefully he learned a little bit about finance and M&A, mergers and acquisitions, from me. So it's been a great partnership, but he's my second mentor, and I actually adopted him. So I give you that point, and think about when you get into your careers and you want to follow somebody, you know, you can adopt them. They don't necessarily have to adopt you. Second point is embrace new skills. When I took the job and left public accounting, I went into this internal audit job. And as I said, I ran around the country doing due diligence. I had no idea what due diligence was, but I learned on the job. I figured it out. It was essentially auditing, but it was auditing in light of doing an acquisition. And it was a lot of fun. It was a thrill to travel at that point in my life. I went all over the US. It was a thrill meeting with entrepreneurs who had started labs. Most of them were doctors who really had no great business experience, but they started a lab because you could do that and send your patients to your lab, make more money. So I would not negotiate necessarily with the doctors. I left that to other people. I wasn't skilled to do that at that point in my career. But I was doing due diligence, I was doing audits, I was figuring out how much we should pay for these labs, and it was a great experience. And that was coupled with sitting with the chief legal counsel of the company, who was actually doing the negotiating. And I learned all the terms while I was sitting at the table. He was kind enough to let me sit there. I learned the terms that you use to negotiate a deal, reps, warranties, things you do in mergers and acquisitions. So I embraced those skills, and they were really helpful to me when I became a CFO, and they were certainly very helpful to me when I started an investment banking firm, since I really didn't have experience in investment banking. The next point is interesting and talks to career transitions. A 90-degree turn is easier than a 180-degree turn, but a 180-degree turn is definitely possible. What's a 180-degree turn? Well, if you're an accountant and you want to be an actor, that's a 180-degree turn. If you want to go from an internal audit position to a controller or CFO, maybe that's a 45 or 90-degree turn, since you have most of the skills. I think it's possible to do a 180-degree turn, but I think that there are skills that you need to have, that you need to be trained for. You can get the training. You can get the training here. You can get the training elsewhere, but it's possible. But 90-degree turns are much easier. And I was lucky enough to be able to do these 90-degree turns a number of times. And you go from becoming a CPA to a CFO to starting an investment banking firm to being a private equity investor, and all of those were 90-degree turns. And I picked up skills along the way that were helpful in terms of making these turns. So I think when you're in a position, you need to look at what skills you want to get to the next position. So a lot of it can be transformed into the other position, but usually there's something that's missing. When I was a CFO, I was missing finance skills, I was missing M&A skills, but I picked them up along the way. You can pick up skills on the job if you're lucky enough to get the job. Develop your personal brand. This is interesting because I found that accounting was a set of rules that you would follow, and you would prepare financial statements. I tried at the time, and it was a little easier then. I build myself out, at least internally, as a creative accountant. I remember one instance that'll maybe give you a better understanding of what I'm saying. Is I finally got to run an audit, and I walked into this toy company, privately held, that had been around since 1922. And in preparing for this talk, I checked, they're still around, and they're still in business, and still privately held. It's a toy company. I won't mention the name, and you'll see why in a moment. But when I got this chance to run the audit, I walked into the door of this toy company. It was then in Brooklyn, and the controller, the CFO, said to me, "If we don't show a profit, the bank's going to shut us down." So I put on my creative cap, and at the time, you could use some creativity, and I restated the earnings for prior years, and I had an extraordinary item, and everything was all legitimate according to the accounting rules, but we walked out of there with a small profit, and the bank didn't shut this company down. And believe it or not, I feel pretty good about it. Today I'd probably be arrested. So the point here is, go beyond the norm, kind of think of yourself in terms of a brand. How you can differentiate yourself will make you more valuable, not only to your present company, but to wherever you end up. And I found that was something that intuitively I did. Develop and utilize your network. Today that's even easier than it was in the 80s and 90s when I was building my career. Today you have all sorts of things like LinkedIn, and I urge everybody in here to, even before you graduate, to get onto LinkedIn, put your resume up there. There are 200 million people. Start connecting to people that you know, and they'll connect you to people that they know. And I found that over the course of my career, there's only one time I had to prepare a resume. Every job I've gotten has been through networking. And today, I believe it's even easier than it was when I was doing it. And people come to me, and I network them with other people, and it's really a great way to get a better job. It's a great way to learn the skills that you might need to get that new job. I counsel people weekly, probably, in terms of putting them in touch with other people that may be helpful to them, or at least giving them some insight into what skills they might need for their next position. One of the things that is interesting in terms of the business incubator that I'm running is people are developing platforms for referrals, and they're doing that to be able to get a great new employee. So referrals are going through people's networks, and you're getting employees who are friends of friends of friends, and within the companies they are paying bonuses because the best employees are those that generally are referred. So get into your network, utilize it, develop it, and I think it'll be helpful in terms of your career, in terms of transitioning your career if that's something you're interested in. Hire people smarter than you and with skills you don't have. So at Lehman, I did okay in accounting and auditing, but cost accounting was way beyond me. I'm not mechanical, difficulty changing light bulbs, and still do. And I found that cost accounting, it didn't work for me. I couldn't figure it out. And when I became a CFO in a manufacturing company, cost accounting is absolutely crucial. So the first hire I made was a guy who had been working on the floor of a manufacturing plant, went back to school, got his accounting degree, and it was so much more operationally oriented than me. I leaned on him for making sure that we were controlling the inventory, understanding the manufacturing process so that we could properly value the inventory, so that we knew that our financial statements were correct. It's crucial in a manufacturing company that the CFO understands it, so I leaned on somebody who had skills I didn't have. In terms of hiring people smarter than you, that's really a good thing. You can make a lot of money doing that. And I did that at my investment banking firm. I've done it throughout my career. Actually, two of my partners in the New York office have taken two business units that I started and have brought them to great heights, and as a result, we've all benefited. And it's bringing in people that not only are smarter than you, but have skills that you don't have. And both of them had skills that I didn't have, and frankly, I think they're smarter than I am. Underpromise and try to overdeliver. That's a mantra that I've used throughout my career, but especially in investment banking, where oftentimes you're selling a company and you tell somebody in advance what their company's worth. And the worst thing you can do is not achieve that number. And typically what I would do is I certainly wouldn't lowball it, because that's not fair. But I'd give a realistic expectation on the low side. So at the end of the day, if I achieved that number or overachieved that number, then I really had a happy client. And the business, to a large extent, when you're doing what I'm doing, which is middle market investment banking, it's built on referrals. And even today, more than 50% of our business comes from referrals. So those are very happy clients. I think that the concept of underpromising and over-delivering applies to any project that you're doing. The worst thing you can do is bring something in late. The best thing you can do is bring it in early. So think about that as you do any kind of project or you get involved in the type of work that I'm doing, which is negotiating transactions and representing companies that are for sale. When opportunity knocks, you need to answer. I got a call. I was happy working at this clinical lab, but I got a call from one of my former clients about going up to Windsor Locks. I wasn't thrilled about going up to Windsor Locks, but I was thrilled about having the opportunity to become the chief financial officer. It was disruptive to my personal life, but it was, in terms of my career, it was one of the best decisions I made. So I urge you not to sit on what your gut says are great opportunities. Second great opportunity I had was the introduction to my partner. As we were downsizing this business in Windsor Locks, I really wasn't thinking about what I was going to do next, but got an introduction from the attorney on the other side of the transaction to one of the two mentors I talked about before, and I jumped on it because it was a great opportunity. I felt very comfortable with this individual. I was able to move back to New Jersey, and it turned out to be the best thing I ever did from both a personal point of view and from the point of view of my career. I'm almost at the end here. Bulls can make money, bears can make money, and pigs get slaughtered. That's the title of a book that's used for investing. I'm not using it in that context. What I'm trying to get to here is almost everything in life is a negotiation. And if you try to just win outright and the other side loses outright, it's not going to work. That's why pigs get slaughtered. That's why Madoff is in jail. I think the best transactions that I've ever done is each side walks away kind of feeling okay, but not super great. And those transactions have worked out the best. So even in the context of negotiating for a raise, you really don't want to, get outrageous. You want your boss to be happy. You want to be happy, but at the same time, it's not the worst thing to leave a little money on the table. And you probably won't hear that from anybody else, but I really do believe that. Last point that I want to make is there are 4 skills that you don't learn in college that I think are important. Actually, one of the skills I learned in the 8th grade. I'll get to that in a moment. The skill of learning to negotiate and how to negotiate. My style has been developed. I'll call it friendly persuasion, which is the name of a book written by Bob Wolf when he was 61 or 63 years old. He was a famous sport agent that negotiated, for example, Larry Bird's contract. And he really believed in friendly persuasion, which is the antithesis of the Donald Trump school of negotiating, intimidate your partner. It really, I think that a best negotiator is one who sits there, digests what the other person is saying, and then feeds it back in a way that gets your point across rather than pounding the table and not listening, which is my second point, is something you don't learn here at Lehman. And I'll read you something that I picked up from an article or a book on listening. And it says, how can you become the one person in the room everyone listens to when a lot of voices are trying to be heard simultaneously? And the answer is by listening to others, which is, again, is a little bit counterintuitive, but throughout my career, I've really learned to listen. And if you digest what the other person's saying, you can figure out a solution that goes along the lines of what he's saying, but gets your point across. So that's a pretty good thing that I've learned, and I urge you to think about it. Learn to type. It's a little strange. Why do I say that? I say that because it's been a productivity tool for me. I probably cut a couple of hours out of the week because I can type 40, 50 words a minute. And I do my own presentations. I don't do the graphics. Norelle knows that. But I told her how I did the graphics for this. But in any event, I'm a pretty good typist, and I learned that in the 8th grade. And I've used it in every job I've had. Even before the PC, I was really a good typist, and still am. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is say thank you. I can't tell you how important that is. I've kept notes from clients who have thanked me. It's one thing, you get a couple $1 million fee and it feels good, but recognition is up there. If you've taken your basic psychology course, it's very much up there on the hierarchy of needs that Maslow talks about, and it's really true. A thank you goes a long way. I guess a thank you can be a bonus or whatever, and I'm working with some companies that are developing thank you platforms that give out immediate bonuses or give something intangible to employees, and they call them recognition platforms, and companies are adopting this because they recognize the need to recognize their employees and not just do it once a year. So that's it for tonight. Hopefully there's something positive you've taken out of this talk, and I thank you. At this point, you can do everything for free.
Okay.
You could network to me. It's all you got to do is shoot me. I'll leave my cards, or you can take my card, shoot me an email.
All right.
You could see that I'm on LinkedIn. I have a public profile. I believe that for free you could ask to be linked to me.
All right.
You don't have to pay anything to be on LinkedIn. I have a great story. It was my favorite deal. I met this gentleman. I forget what year it was, but it's not that important. I met this gentleman. He came to my office. He sat down and he said, described his business. And his business was he had developed 100 tests to test the proficiency of IT programmers. And what he was doing, he was using a bit of artificial intelligence. So if you got one answer right, then he gave you a harder answer and a harder question in each subsector of these technical skills. And they could be learning Java or learning any one of these programming languages that existed at the time. And he had developed this great company that was in his basement. And he had 4 employees. And he said to me, I am just overwhelmed with the managerial responsibilities, and I'm a techie. I don't want this anymore. Can you help me sell the business? So I said to him, Harvey, tell me a little bit more. So he said, I'm doing $4.5 million in revenue, and I think I'm making $4 million a year. That's pretty good. And he was doing that literally out of the basement in Brooklyn. So I said, wow. And in my mind, with buyers going through my mind as to who would be interested. So at the time, I had access to a private plane, and I flew him to Baltimore, met with the Sylvan folks, and they wouldn't let me leave. I mean, they wanted this so badly. So I hadn't even figured out a price. So I said to them $100 million, because I figured that if they're making $4 million and their PE is more than 25, they could pay $100 million. So they gagged a little bit, and they wouldn't let us leave, and we walked out of there with a $50 million deal. It didn't happen with Sylvan, but it did happen with one of Mike Milken's companies. He's got an educational company called Knowledge Universe, and this gentleman ultimately got $50 million for his business, and it's a business that was built in the basement of his home. So that's my favorite story. Getting my master's degree at Boston happened 33 years after I graduated Lehman, and it basically qualified me to do the job I'd been doing for 20 years. It was more a matter of self-satisfaction that everybody who worked for me had their master's and I didn't. And it was something I always wanted to do. So I really rode the back of my Bachelor of Science degree in accounting to get to where I had gotten. The master's was just really, cream on top, or whipped cream on top of a cupcake. But in the context of today's world, it probably would be more difficult to do what I did. Virtually everybody that works for me has their master's, as I said before, and I think the finance aspect of getting your master's it would make life a lot easier to get into investment banking with your master's. I do have some people that do not have their master's that have gone through the ranks and are, one is actually a partner and one will be a partner. So it's doable, but candidly it's much easier to get your MBA. That's an excellent question. I think you look, number one, for people you want to emulate. People that are successful, but people that have the skills that you would like to have, whether they be a personality, whether they be technical. I think if you latch on to somebody after watching them for a while, that's your ideal mentor. Somebody you want to be, somebody who has been, as I said, successful. And success is measured in lots of different ways. It's not necessarily monetary success. I happen to latch on to somebody who is both monetarily successful in his personal life, and successful in developing what I consider a great culture at the company he started. This particular individual had only worked at one company and started when he was 22, started a technology firm and built it to a significant level and developed a great culture. So, I quickly latched on to, to him. And it was one of the best things I did. Well, it depends if you want to go into investment banking. I think getting some of the business law, I took a business law course here that was helpful. I think even psychology courses, candidly, are helpful, because it's a people business. It's not all technical skills. It goes way beyond that. Technical skills becomes, as you advance in your career, even smaller and smaller of your daily job. So I'd say psychology, business law. But again, if you want to take accounting and become a professor, you probably need to get both your master's and your PhD. So it's a different track. I didn't go that way.
I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.